Welcome, everyone. We're going to give it just a couple minutes as folks trickle in. Welcome, though. We're happy to have you here today. My name is Harmony. I'm the Community Engagement Strategist for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. While we all get settled, we're going to drop in the chat here. Please feel free to put your name, your pronouns, if you're representing an organization. And then in just a moment, we'll do a little group activity via chat here. See a few more people popping in. Welcome, welcome. We're just doing introductions in the chat here for people. Go ahead and put your name, pronouns, and if you're representing an organization, we are glad to have you here today. All right, and as we get settled, we're going to do a little activity. We are here to talk about clean energy, which is super exciting. So I want you all to take a moment and think about by the year 2050, we're in Portland. We've reached our goal of 100% clean energy and net zero carbon. And when you think about Portland in this future context, what's one word that comes to mind? And just drop it in the chat. I'm going to put that question in here too. All right, I see him coming in. I love it. Relief, fresh, quiet, community, abundant, sunshine. If you have a couple that come to mind, that's okay. We want to hear them. Awesome. Okay, keep them coming, keep them coming. Oh, I love it. It's popping off in there. Again, for those of you who were not in when I introduced myself, my name is Harmony Dashiell. I use she, her pronouns. I work for BPS as a community engagement strategist, and I'm just kind of kicking us off today. We're also joined here by my colleague, Wayne Grabowski. Wayne, can you maybe give a little wave? He is doing our tech today. So if at any point during the conversation something is wonky or not working, please feel free to direct message him. You can do that in the chat screen. You can select whether it's everyone or to Wing, and just Wing is our tech person. So please feel free to reach out if you need any assistance on that front, and we can get things ironed out for you, hopefully. And then last call, I think maybe we had a few more people. Our visioning exercise right now is by 2050, we will have reached 100% clean electricity and net zero carbon. When you think about Portland in this future context, what is one word that comes to mind? And those are just being dropped in the chat. Repair, I see some more answers coming in. These answers just bring a smile to my face. I appreciate you all, and I appreciate you all for being here and making time today. I think with that, we'll go ahead and get going. See, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Andrea. Andrea Jacob.
Hello. Thank you, Harmony. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Jacob. I'm the Climate Policy and Program Manager at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I use she, her pronouns. And welcome to our second climate conversation. These events are one way that the climate program at the city can share information and connect with people in the public about climate. So today, our main event is a presentation and conversation about 100% clean electricity for all. At our first event back in December, we heard that this was an area of interest. And it's our intent that you'll come away from today with a better understanding of what that means and how it might impact you directly. But before we dive into that, I just want to take a minute to share what we've accomplished since our first climate conversation in December. Since then, City Council took two significant actions to reduce carbon emissions in Portland. The first action was to adopt a code that phases out petroleum diesel fuel sold at the pump in Portland. So if you have a diesel engine and you fuel up in Portland, starting in 2026, every gallon of diesel that you pump will be 50% renewable. And by 2030, 100% of that fuel will be renewable. Diesel is the fourth largest source of emissions in the city, and it's also a major contributor to air pollution. When you burn diesel, it creates soot, and that makes people really sick, especially people of color and low-income people that disproportionately live near freeways and industrial areas. So Portland is the only city in the country to phase out sales of petroleum diesel. So this action is a pretty big deal, and we're pretty excited about it. And we're getting underway with implementation this year. The second action was to adopt a code requiring new buildings to be electric vehicle ready. This means developers now have to make sure that there's room for future electrical capacity and that conduit is installed at time of construction. And conduits is a technical word for the pipes that house EV wiring. The code doesn't actually require the wiring or the electrical capacity to be installed at the time of construction, but it creates the space for future, for electrical work in the future. And this is important because it's much less expensive to build new construction EV ready than it is to go back and retrofit a building once it's built. So this is a cost-effective way to build the infrastructure to enable the infrastructure we need to transition our cars and our other vehicles to run on electricity. In addition to these two important decarbonization policies, City Council also made a historic investment in climate programming for this year's fiscal year's budget. And as a result of this investment, the climate team has been able to add 4 new staff that we've been so excited to welcome and add to our team. We wanted to give them each a minute to introduce themselves and tell you what they'll be working on. But just a spoiler alert, it all maps back to our climate emergency work plan, which is the city's climate action plan through 2025. So right now I'd like to welcome Tunde Oni to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tunde Oni. I use he, him pronouns. I've been with the climate team as a general decarbonization analyst for the last 3 months. I'm honored to be part of the climate team at BPS, and I'm glad to be at this climate conversations. Right now, I work on the climate emergency work plan, and I work on green building policy, and I also work on general grant administration for the climate team. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lauren Zimmerman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an embodied carbon analyst on the climate team. My focus is on low embodied carbon building materials, design, and construction practices.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. My name is Stephen Greenslade. I use he, him pronouns, and I started up in February as an analyst on the climate team, helping to integrate consideration of climate impacts in city decision-making processes through the implementation of our citywide internal cost of carbon policy, which is really about quantifying and valuing the future carbon impacts of the things we do today and using that knowledge to help steer our way to a climate-safe future. With that, I'll pass it to Brian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Garcia. I use he, him pronouns, and I manage the commercial building energy reporting program as well as the home energy score program. I started with the city in late January of this year, and I'm happy to be a part of this conversation. Look forward to working with you all. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. If anyone has any specific questions for these folks, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I wanted to take just one more quick minute to acknowledge the rest of the climate team that are in the room with us today, and they'll drop their names and roles in the chat as well. You can also find all of us in our Zoom boxes. We have this is our building in the background, and our screen names all begin with the letters BPS. So right now, I'm going to hand it over to Paul Hawkins, our Buildings and Energy Program Manager, to lead us through the conversation about 100% clean electricity.
Thanks, Andrea. Give me 1 second here to pull up presentation. Hopefully you all can see that. All right, I will jump right in. So good afternoon, and once again, thank you all for joining our climate conversation. My name is Paul Hawkins. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Building and Energy Program Manager for our climate team at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Thank you for your interest in clean emissions-free electricity. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'll plan to share an exciting new opportunity to make clean electricity the default for all Portlanders. So a brief agenda here. I'll take a few minutes to talk about Portland's electricity landscape today. I'll frame the climate emergency that we're facing today and climate action, what that looks like at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We'll spend some time shaping our vision for 100% clean electricity. And of course, there will be time for sort of next steps and question and answer. But first, let's start with a really high-level overview of our electricity suppliers here in Portland. So we have two electric utilities, Portland General Electric and Pacific Power. Throughout the presentation, I'll try my best to avoid using acronyms, but Portland General Electric is also referred to as PGE sometimes, and Pacific Power can also be referred to as PAC or PAC. So you'll see on this image that a large area of the city is supplied with electricity from Portland General Electric in blue, while most of Northeast Portland and some of downtown Portland's electricity is supplied by Pacific Power in pink. These two power suppliers both use many different ways to generate the electricity that we use in our everyday lives. Next, I'll show you that the carbon intensity, or the emissions from your electricity, may vary depending on where you live and who your electricity provider is. So this is a simplified graph that reflects the electric generation mix for Portland General Electric as of 2022. This data is sourced directly from PGE's website, and I've broken it into these three categories: emitting, non-emitting, and other. So here, emitting refers to electricity produced from either coal or natural gas. And non-emitting refers to electricity produced from wind or solar or hydropower. Let's not dwell on the other category today. This is typically called market purchases in the industry. In a pinch, if a utility needs more power, they can buy electricity outside of their dedicated long-term resources. This could be hydropower from our region's dams. It could also be electricity generated from burning coal. But again, let's just call this other and not dwell on it for today. Now to the image. What this pie graph shows is that as of 2022, Portland General Electric's electricity was made up of about 39% hydro, wind, solar, and 40% of it was made up of natural gas or coal. Again, 21% other here. What this means is that when you turn on your TV or charge your electric car, about 40% of that power originates as coal or natural gas that releases emissions to the atmosphere when it's converted to electricity. So today, that electric vehicle isn't really emissions free. This is the same as the previous slide, but now we're looking at the electricity generation of Pacific Power as of 2020. This data is taken directly from our Oregon Department of Energy. Same categories here. So for our non-emitting resources, there's a 21% wind, hydro, and solar, 69% emitting, so coal and natural gas, with this 10% sliver of other or market purchases. So I want to just give you that background. And with that, I'll move into our first poll and introduce this topic. So both Portland General Electric and Pacific Power offer their customers the option to participate in a voluntary renewable energy credit program to offset the emissions from your electricity use. And I'm curious today to learn how many of you are familiar with these programs, or if some of you might already be enrolled. So to help jog your memory, if you're a Portland General Electric customer, the program's called Green Future Choice. If you're a Pacific Power customer, the program is called Blue Sky. You may have heard about them at a local community event or on your monthly power bill, but I'll give you all a moment to respond to the question, do you participate in a renewable electricity program today? Wow, 30 out of 48 responses so far. We're at 66%. I'll give it another moment. Still one or two answers trickling in, but we're at about 75% participation. All right, I think Wing, we can go ahead and close the poll at about 81% participation. Thank you all for sharing that. I will reference a couple of these numbers in just a moment. So today, we'll be talking about a new way to purchase clean energy. It's a familiar idea for many Portlanders, as actually Portland ranks #1 nationwide in voluntary opt-in programs. So PGE's Green Future Choice and Pacific Power's Blue Sky both boast some of the nation's highest participation rates at 26% and 14% respectively. From our poll here, we learned that, let's see, we have about 25 out of 40 responses of people who are already participating. So over 50% are already enrolled in these kinds of programs. While about 10 of you are not enrolled, there's another 6 of you that are maybe not enrolled, but interested in these programs. So it's clear that there's strong community interest and support for clean electricity. And in fact, in a 2020 poll conducted by Portland General Electric, 86% of respondents said that they would participate or would consider a community-wide program like the one we're going to talk about today. So I want to set the stage and acknowledge that we are in the midst of a clean energy transition. The state of Oregon celebrated historic energy legislation in 2021 that commits our state to 100% emissions-free electricity by 2040. The legislation has already made an impact towards reducing the emissions that come from electricity generation, but we got a long way to go. What I really want to point out is that this legislation includes an important provision and pathway for local governments and communities to accelerate adoption of 100% clean electricity. As outlined in our city's 2022 Climate Emergency Work Plan, Portland can and must accelerate the energy transition. Action E1 of the work plan outlines the importance of decarbonizing our electric grid that delivers the electricity that we use every day. The electricity that we use is actually the largest contributor to the city's total emissions. Electricity produced from burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas make up approximately 25% of the city's total emissions. In order to meet our climate goals, as we electrify our homes and our cars and our businesses, we must ensure that the electricity comes from renewable sources rather than from fossil fuels. So the city of Portland has prioritized reducing the emissions from our electricity by establishing a few key goals. The big one, is 100% clean, renewable electricity by 2030. And I want to take a moment to ground this goal in 3 adopted city policies. So first, in 2017, the city adopted the 100% renewable energy resolution that all community-wide energy needs, to meet all community-wide energy needs with renewable energy by 2050. Then in 2020, Portland's climate emergency declaration accelerated this goal to deliver clean electricity that includes a maximal amount of community-based energy to all Portland residents and businesses no later than 2030. As I mentioned earlier, we doubled down on this 2030 goal and reiterated it as a priority action in our climate emergency work plan in 2022. So I mentioned community-based energy. The city also has a goal of 2% community ownership of renewable energy generation assets by 2030 and a 10% ownership goal by 2050. Community benefit and ownership is a really important step towards energy justice. So if energy justice is a new term for you, it refers to the goal of achieving equity in both the social and economic participation in the energy system, while also redressing past harms to frontline, Indigenous, and historically underserved communities. Energy justice aims to make energy accessible, affordable, clean, and democratically managed for all communities. So with that said, we've got some work to do together to better define what this goal of community ownership means and really looks like for Portlanders. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, is the world's definitive body focused on climate change. Less than a month ago, the IPCC chair, Ho-Sung Lee, gave a sobering update that the pace and scale of climate action are insufficient to tackle climate change. He addressed the issue in clear terms that we can all understand. We are walking when we should be sprinting. Collectively, we need to take action to slow the effects of climate change. So with that, I'm going to introduce our second poll here. And I'm curious to ask, what lifestyle choices do you think have the most impact on reducing carbon emissions? And I'm going to ask that you try to rank these 4 options in order of priority. So the first, diet and food waste. So you can think about that as buying food locally, choosing not to eat meat, or minimizing your food waste. Transportation emissions, think about that as driving less, flying less, buying an electric car, maybe walking, biking, or taking public transportation. Energy use, reducing your home energy use, purchasing efficient appliances, or purchasing renewable power. And being a conscious consumer, conscious consumerism, follow the 3 R's that we're taught in school: reduce, reuse, recycle, or purchase sustainably. So I'll give you all a moment to rank these options and take a moment to think about that. Looks like we've got about 75% participation so far. And I'll actually just ask a quick question of our moderators. I'm not sure if we were able to share the results from that first poll. It shows up on my screen, but I'm not sure if everyone can see that or not.
Yeah, I can hit share as soon as we end it, then we can share it out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We've got 34 people out of 44. We're pretty good here. I'll give it just one more moment if you're ranking these or ordering them. Awesome. I think we can go ahead and end the poll, and we'll share out a few of these results. So it looks like a lot of you ranked transportation emissions, followed by energy use, diet and food waste, followed by consumerism. So the answer to this question really varies by person and by household. And I want to underscore that all actions are important here. Reducing transportation emissions by flying less or switching to an electric car can have a significant impact, depending on your habits today. But remember that electricity from your electric vehicle may not be emissions-free. Reducing your home energy use and purchasing clean energy can also have a tremendous impact, especially if your energy consumption is high today. Your diet can have a big impact, as there are emissions associated with getting that food into your fridge, and certainly methane emissions from food waste that ends up in landfills. Similarly, it's important to be a conscious consumer and consider the full life cycle of a product, its raw materials, where it's made, what happens to it once you're done with that product. So I'd encourage you all to take that conscious consumer approach. So thank you all for participating in that poll. I want to come back to our presentation here and share some exciting news. We have the opportunity as a community to act now and make clean electricity the default in Portland. What 100% clean electricity for all hopes to accomplish is to design an opt-out style program that increases access to emissions-free power and offers direct benefits to the community. That means each time you turn on the light or charge your phone, you'll know that the electricity is emissions-free and supporting Oregon's clean energy future. Our goal is to accelerate the energy transition and maximize its benefits to Portlanders, all at a cost of less than $10 per month on your electricity bill. It's important to note here that this program will come at no cost to income qualified customers. And while there will be an opportunity to opt out of participation, we hope that when the time comes, you'll be motivated to be part of this climate solution. Now, depending how you want to think about it, the estimated cost is less than a food cart lunch on the go. It's less than an Uber ride home from your friend's house. It's less than the cost of your monthly Netflix subscription. And it's even cheaper than a bag of coffee beans. We hope to make this one of the best investments you can make for the future. So let me take a step back and share a few high-level facts to recenter our conversation here. This program would initially be for Portland General Electric customers, with the addition of Pacific Power customers in the future. It would be primarily for residential and small commercial customers. It will be offered at a comparable price to existing voluntary programs, like the two that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. I want to note that Multnomah County is a very key partner here and helps extend the reach to greater Portland. And finally, that this is meant to be shaped by local governments and by community. So I'm going to come back to this community engagement piece in just a moment. I want to take a breath of fresh air to imagine a clean energy future. In this vision, by 2030, Portland's electricity supply is 100% clean. And our community has inspired other communities in Oregon and helps support our electric utilities to decarbonize their grid. We've also dramatically reduced greenhouse gas emissions for a healthier future. By 2040, all of Oregon's electricity would be emissions-free. And Portlanders are taking ownership of our electric generation. So for those of you who like numbers and examples, here are some tangible benefits of taking action now to reduce our electric emissions. For this slide, I've used a round number, a rough ballpark estimate of 1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions avoided annually. This is a big number, but it offers an estimate of what we could accomplish together. By decarbonizing our electricity supply and reducing our emissions, this would be equivalent to removing 222,000 gas-powered passenger vehicles annually. It's equivalent to the electricity usage of 194,000 homes. It's also equivalent to the carbon sequestration, or the carbon removed from the atmosphere, by 1,192,000 acres of US forests. These estimates are sourced from an Environmental Protection Agency emissions calculator, if you're curious. Again, it's a big round number, but I wanted to try to make this real for you. So the big question that might be on your mind is, how do we get there? I want to acknowledge that this is a multi-year process that's going to take contributions from our local government, our utilities and our regulators at the Oregon Public Utility Commission, and you, our community. I want to emphasize, as I've alluded to earlier, that this process will include robust community engagement to help define what community benefits are really important to Portlanders. Let's focus on this community engagement for a moment on the next slide. So the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is planning community engagement beginning in the fall of 2023, likely to continue well into 2024, to seek input on the program design, including the costs and benefits it provides to Portlanders. We'd like to better understand the community's desire and ability to contribute financially to this clean energy transition. As you can see from this graphic on the right, we envision a community process that seeks to balance affordability with community benefits. We value your input as we look to define what community-based energy generation should look like. So this brings me to our final poll. And I'm going to do a little bit of framing here to help you answer this question. So there's a variety of ways to acquire clean electricity. Some are more visible and connected to the community, sort of like the electricity equivalent of local organic produce from a farmer's market. This artisanal type of electricity is slightly more expensive, but it directly benefits the community. Other electricity is mass-produced and generated elsewhere, like the equivalent of produce from a big box store. This option is less expensive, but also less connected to the community. So the question I want to ask is, what percentage of this local beneficial clean electricity would you like Portland to use in the future? So I'll give you some time to weigh these options. And I hope I got at least one chuckle out of my artisanal electricity jokes here. See a good number of answers coming in. We're at about 50% participation. And I'm going to say this more than once. This is not your only opportunity to weigh in and offer input. See our participation in the poll is creeping up around 65%. I think previously we hit at least 75, 80%. So I'm going to encourage you all to respond to this poll question. All right, I think we've got about 70% participation. So we can go ahead and close this poll. And I, again, would like to share out the results here. And I will say one more time, this is not your only opportunity to weigh in and offer input. It's not your only bite of the apple. There will be many more opportunities. But it looks like about 37% of you said that 100% artisanal electricity would be your choice. But all of the respondents here expressed interest in having some form of local clean electricity in Oregon's energy mix and in Portland's energy mix. So I'll move on to the next slide. And I'm really going to start to wrap up this presentation. So we'll be working on this throughout 2023 and into 2024. And we look forward to gathering input from you. You can sign up for the BPS newsletter. And soon we hope to have a web page dedicated to this clean electricity effort. Please also consider joining our future climate conversations as a way to stay involved. But in the near term, we are planning community outreach and engagement to start this fall and likely run through next spring. So stay tuned for more details. For those of you who have an interest in the energy policy and the nuance of this process, I do expect that there will be hearings at the Oregon Public Utility Commission later this year and again in the spring of 2024. And then finally, as required by the legislative statute, in order to make this a reality, it requires action by local government. While no timetable is set yet, I would expect that in 2024, You'll also have the opportunity to testify and voice your support or opposition of clean electricity at Portland City Council. And with that, I think I want to just thank you all so much for your time and attention. I've certainly done enough talking. I'd love to hear from you all. And I think at this point, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Paul. We have one question already in the chat, and please feel free to drop questions in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you and you can speak out. So from Julie, has there been any discussion about making these programs easier for multifamily condo buildings? I believe the process involves votes of the membership of an HOA, but could be wrong.
I think that's a very good question, and I appreciate you bringing up that point. I think we're at early sort of discussions and decision making. This is largely based off of the rate schedule that you're a part of with your utility. So we'd have to really look at who's included in different rate schedules and how it impacts multifamily residents directly. But I totally recognize and understand that hurdle.
Thank you. And again, we welcome questions. We want this to be a conversation for sure. So if you have any, you can either drop them in the chat or raise your virtual hand, which you can do down at the bottom of the screen by clicking on the reactions button, and it gives the hand raise function.
Hopefully I didn't put people to sleep over the lunch hour here.
No, we've got, okay. So Ari, thank you. Is signing up for this $10 a month option something through the city, or are you trying to find ways to increase participation in the already existing Portland General Electric Pacific Power programs? In my non-professional hat, I feel like the reason most people don't sign up for these programs is because they assume it won't work. Like the airline charges $2 per flight for the carbon fee. Not saying that's the case, but there's some, lived experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll take the opportunity to sort of reiterate the key difference here that the existing programs, like you mentioned, are opt-in. So you have to sort of go out of your way to sign up to be enrolled for these programs. And what we're talking about here is sort of the flip side of that, making this an opt-out program so that this would be the default if you are a residential customer or a small commercial customer. There would be opportunities to then opt out of this participation. But the other key difference really is that with this program, we would be focused on purchasing energy that's not only maybe sited in Oregon, but sited in Portland. And that's not necessarily the case with some of the programs that exist today. So there's a few key differences, but definitely that opt-in versus opt-out scenario is a big one.
Thank you. Brian, I see your hand.
Thanks, Harmony. Do you, Paul, have a sense on what PGE's viewpoints are on this process and program?
Yeah, I don't want to overstep in any way. I think there may be a couple folks from PGE on the line, but I will just say that this takes collaboration and coordination. We've been working with PGE to sort of develop a proposal that goes through the Public Utility Commission, that goes through sort of formal processes to get this approved. We have to work with PGE as a partner to get this done, and with Pacific Power. And so both of our utilities are working to introduce clean energy in their mix to meet the mandated state goals, but they're also eager partners to work with us and support our goals as a city.
Thank you. And then
Thank
in the
you.
chat, thank you, Brian. What would community ownership look like? Is there a push to create urban solar array by paying low income or qualifying residents to lend their roofs to the utility companies to generate energy ultra locally right here in the city?
Great question. I absolutely think there's a potential for that. I think that's kind of the key thing that we would like to understand and hear from community. That's what we'd like to get out of our community engagement process. And, that micro scale energy generation does cost more. And so to what extent do we lean into those resources that you can see in your community, that you can help maintain, that we can use as an educational opportunity, versus larger scale generation that balances affordability. So there's definitely a potential for that. And I would encourage you to sort of keep track of some of these engagement opportunities and share that opinion.
Thanks. And Kenneth would just put a drop, not a question, but to check out the community solar participation at Portland General Electric and Pacific, that 450 Daimler truck employees signed up. That sounds awesome. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions, comments? You mentioned that this starts with Portland General Electric customers only. I'm a Pacific Power customer. Will Pacific Power participate as well?
That's a great question. We sure hope so. And we have had conversations with Pacific Power about extending this. We're a little further along with Portland General Electric, so that's kind of what I focused on today. But our city goal is to provide, all of community need and resources with clean energy and clean electricity. So we do hope to get there. Great questions, y'all.
All right, Paul, I have another one. Can you explain the difference between the programs mentioned in the presentation and community solar, or are those the same thing?
I can take a stab at it. The programs mentioned in the presentation, I'm guessing that you're referring to the Blue Sky program and Green Future Choice. Those opt-in programs are voluntary. They provide sort of the attribute to clean energy. It's a certificate that says clean energy was produced likely somewhere in the West, and that you own that attribution. So it invests in clean energy, but maybe not necessarily directly in our state or in our community. Whereas community solar is also opt-in, but those are real projects, that steel in the ground projects, mostly in Oregon, that you get a small share of, a subscription to. And you get that power directly. So it's a little more tangible. And really what we're talking about here is a little bit more of that community solar flavor, that we sort of invest in our grid and our communities, and deliver those electrons, as well as the certification that the energy is clean. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
I think I would just add to that community solar could be one of those sources that goes into the 100% product that we're essentially signing up for. So they are connected, and in that way, we would hope to see community solar be that the 100% clean program would help the case for community solar.
Thank you both. And we have another comment in the chat that Northwest Natural Gas is demonstrating a system that captures carbon from natural gas exhaust. It is 100% sequestered potassium carbonate used, I think, to make soap. And then our next question here, with legislation laying out the timeline for 100% clean, what is the future of the existing opt-in programs? At what point will these programs not be needed any longer? And what happens to rates for those who opted in and out? Is the city program essentially seeking revenue by making the transition happen faster by adding an additional cost to the individual option?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would encourage you to come to some of our engagement events. I don't want to speak out of turn necessarily. They are like for like programs. We would hope that, again, we're moving investment toward our own community. I would hope that we can look at this in terms of accelerating climate action and accelerating that clean transition. And I hope to be able to present a very clear sort of benefit of doing so now and taking action now. That 1 million metric tons was just a big round number, but ideally we can get to very real numbers that are tangible for folks that are making that decision. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. I hope I answered the question in a reasonable way, but I would love to continue that conversation.
Did you say though that it would sunset in 2040 when the?
Correct. Sorry. That is a key piece that regardless opt-in and opt-out programs, either of these two should sunset in 2040. So our state requires that the big electric utilities have emissions-free electricity in 2040. So that would be a requirement that would be built into sort of the standard rates and cost of service by 2040. So there would not be any sort of premiums or voluntary programs above and beyond that general electricity after 2040.
Do we have a nickname for this program for easy reference?
Today, we're calling it 100% clean electricity.
Yeah, I just dropped that in the chat too.
Awesome.
Cool. Property fit with, I'm not familiar with the acronym, so apologies. CPACE can finance energy saving upgrades and EV charger installations for building owners. And we got a fab reaction for our name. Thank you, Ari.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a question there to respond to, but PACE helps provide financing for building and efficiency upgrades. It's a little outside of purview here, but perhaps there's additional ways to invest in our community. A bit open-ended. I'll take a minute to just say thanks again for all these questions. I love the level of engagement here. It always starts a little slow, but I love that people have felt comfortable typing in the chat or sharing their questions or comments with us.
Paul, are there additional equity considerations that we should be thinking about with respect to BIPOC and low income benefits and or burdens related to the 100% clean energy for all program and or community ownership? Will there be targeted outreach and engagement to low income Portlanders?
That is absolutely the hope, that we take that into consideration, that we're reaching all types of Portlanders, meeting them where they are and really doing our best to hear how this can impact people before we move to a potential cost premium of less than $10 per month. So absolutely. And again, I hope to have more details on that this fall.
Ingrid, we will be working with facilitation experts to design an inclusive process for community engagement later this fall. Absolutely. And we have a lot of relationships in other spaces that are adjacent that we hope to bring to other into those spaces too.
So I may just sort of wrap up here a little bit. We've got about 10 minutes left. Just again, wanted to say thank you all. I think I'm going to maybe stop sharing my screen and there's a few other little things we have before we wrap up today. But thank you again.
Yeah, I want to sneak in one more question here. Unlike community solar, where the group of buyers shares ownership, in this case, would the entire city own all the clean energy resources communally?
It's another very good question, and a bit in the details that we're hoping to really unpack that and understand. Again, understanding that it would be a community-wide investment on utility bills, and so really understanding how we transfer ownership and take ownership of some of these resources is yet to be determined, but I certainly would like to see opportunities for underserved, underrepresented communities to have ownership of some of these solar systems or other generation facilities.
And are we talking about residential or residential and commercial?
It is primarily for residential and small commercial. So again, it's based off of certain rate schedules at the utilities, but residential and small commercial.
Sounds great. And then I just wanted to capture Dasha's comment about having canvas for renewable energy programs to all Portlanders, and that there were lots of reasons shared why people couldn't or didn't want to subscribe to utilities. So that information may be already started for us and out there.
Thank you.
And I love the Green Bay Packers comment. Yes, revolutionary, like people owning the Green Bay Packers. All right, Andrea, maybe I'm going to pass it to you before I wrap us up here, but any closing remarks from you, Andrea? And then I just have a couple housekeeping things before we all move on with what's next in our day.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Okay, so this has been super helpful. The questions are all really spot on, and we will continue to be engaging on this. We'll have a website coming soon, as Paul mentioned, and there will be an opportunity to sign up for an email on that will create our distribution list for this project. So keep an eye out, and we'll also be communicating through the channels that brought you here. So more to come on that. Our next climate conversation will happen in the fall. We don't have a date set, but we're doing these 3 times a year, essentially skipping the summer. I also wanted to give a chance to flash. We did a word cloud with all of your answers from the chat from earlier, and whoever is going to flash that up on the screen, that would be awesome. I think Eli. Looks real cool.
I don't seem to have permissions, but if I can be issued those permissions, I can share it.
Okay, well, while you work on that, wanted to just also note that it's Earth Month, and actual Earth Day is this coming Saturday. And so encourage you to get out and engage with Mother Earth, and we'll drop a link in the chat to some really good ideas that Multnomah County has. This is our word cloud. Very cool. All right. And then I guess lastly, Vivian, do you want to say a few words just about other ways that folks can engage with climate and sustainability in the future?
Yeah, hi everybody. Just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Vivian Satterfield. Use she, her pronouns, or my name is also fine. I'm the new Chief Sustainability Officer here at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and get to work with all the very talented and dedicated folks that you see here as a part of the climate team, and also the solid waste and materials management team at BPS, including my colleague, actually, Elaine Livingstone, who's also joined the Bureau. And we'll be working closely together to stand up the new Sustainability and Climate Commission by the end of this calendar year. So not only alongside a lot that we learned today from Paul about the 100% clean electricity, there'll also be various opportunities to become deeply engaged in the work of guiding our sustainability and climate goals here at the city. Thanks so much for being here and spending your noon hour with us.
Thank you, Vivian. And with that, we are adjourned 5 minutes early. Thanks again. We'll be following up.
Yeah, and we will be dropping a couple links in the chat here if you want additional resources as well as a survey, and we'll shoot that out in an email following up too. But thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your all participation.